My husband, who is 39 years old, and I, who am 40 years old, have been married for 12 years and have 3 kids who are 10, 8, and 5 years old. I was a stay-at-home mom for most of our kids' lives and only re-entered the workforce 2 years ago when our middle child reached kindergarten, so we didn't have to pay a lot for daycare. I have worked my way up the ladder in my chosen field of work and finally feel like I am more than just a stay-at-home mom. The company I work for holds a big black tie gala for a Christmas or holiday party every year. Last year, we were unable to attend due to me being sick, so I was really looking forward to it this year. My sister even agreed to drive 3 hours to spend the night with the kids, so we didn't have to worry about a babysitter. I bought a nice fancy dress, and my husband rented a tuxedo in preparation for the event last Friday. Then, during the week of Thanksgiving, my husband's favorite uncle passed away. My husband didn't have a relationship with his dad growing up, and his uncle didn't have kids of his own. So his uncle was definitely a father figure for my husband, even if it was in more of a funkle way. The funeral was held the week before my work event, but because it was held in another state that required a flight, only my husband attended. When he got back, I talked to him about it, and he said he was sad and grieving, but also said he was fine. Nothing about his day-to-day life was out of the ordinary, and he did take a couple of days off work after he got back to have some time for himself to process things. My sister arrived the day before my work event, and that night, my husband told me that he didn't feel up to attending the event. His reasons were that he was socially and emotionally exhausted, and the last thing he felt like doing was making more small talk with a bunch of strangers, like he had to do at his uncle's funeral. I reminded him that my sister had just driven hours to watch the kids. I had already bought a new dress. He had rented a tuxedo, and most importantly, this was something I was really looking forward to. He said that I could still attend by myself, but I told him that it is also important to me that he comes with me and that we hadn't had a date night in almost 6 months. He agreed to go, but he sulked about it the entire time. He dragged his feet getting ready. He didn't socialize, he didn't want to dance, etc. At one point, I lost track of him and found him sitting at the bar by himself. When I went to talk to him to try and get him to come socialize with me, he told me that he already told me he has no energy for that and that he only came because I made him. I told him that if he was going to just sulk and drink alone, we might as well leave, and he said, "Great, let's go." I told him how disappointed I was that he acted that way at an event that he knew was extremely important to me, and he got defensive and told me it was my fault for dragging him there when he didn't want to go. He's barely spoken to me since, unless it's about the kids. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I told him that if he was going to just sulk and drink alone, we might as well leave, and he said, "Great, let's go." You're the idiot. He was honest with you about what he was going through, and you have the nerve to be upset that he wasn't a social butterfly at your event. I told him how disappointed I was that he acted that way at an event that he knew was extremely important to me, and he got defensive and told me it was my fault for dragging him there when he didn't want to go. He's barely spoken to me since, unless it's about the kids. You completely disregarded his feelings and the fact that he is grieving a major, formative relationship in his life. You had zero grace for what he was going through, then berated him for his very natural feelings. It shouldn't be a surprise he is now hurt and distant from you. He's probably just trying to hold himself together. Comment 2. Unfortunately, I think you're the idiot. While I can certainly understand the excitement of attending an event and the disappointment of it falling apart, with your sister driving and all, your husband deserved to grieve. Additionally, while he may not have been social, you still had the opportunity to be. I think the jab about him sulking was a bit much. Weirdly for me, the thing that bothers me the most about this story, you guys haven't had a date night in 6 months, and you made all this effort for a work event, including having babysitters drive in. I think you need to prioritize your relationship more. Work events are not a date night, in my opinion, and maybe if you guys spent more time together, communication would be better, and you'd have talked it out by now. Now, for the update. So, it's been a week since the gala disaster, and let me tell you, things have been tense at home. My husband has been quiet, and I've been trying to give him space, but it's hard when we're both stewing in our own versions of the story. The day after the gala, my sister left, and she could tell something was off. She's always been the one I confide in, but this time, I just thanked her and didn't say much. I didn't want to drag her into our mess. She's had her own share of relationship drama, and I didn't want to add to her stress. Work has been my escape. I've thrown myself into it, staying late, taking on extra projects, anything to avoid going home to the Cold War brewing there. My boss noticed and gave me a nod of approval, which felt good. It's nice to be recognized for my efforts, especially when things are so rocky elsewhere. But then, just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, they did. At work, there's this guy, let's call him Mark. He's been with the company for a few years, and we've worked on a few projects together. He's always been friendly, but since the gala, he's been different. More attentive. He's been stopping by my desk, asking how I'm doing, and even brought me coffee one morning. I didn't think much of it at first, but then he asked me out for drinks after work. I was taken aback. I mean, I'm married, and he knows that. I politely declined, saying I had to get home to the kids, but he just smiled and said, "Some other time then." That night, I told my husband about Mark's invitation, hoping it would spark some kind of reaction, maybe even a hint of jealousy. But he just shrugged it off and said, "You should go. Have some fun." His indifference stung more than I expected. The next day, I was working late again, and Mark popped his head in, asking if I wanted to grab a quick dinner since we were both still at the office. I hesitated, but hunger and the need for some kind of human connection won out. We went to a nearby place, and it was nice. We talked about work, life, and everything in between. I found myself laughing, something I hadn't done in a while. When I got home, my husband was already in bed. The kids were asleep, and the house was quiet. I sat on the couch, thinking about the evening, and I felt guilty. Not because anything happened with Mark, but because I enjoyed myself without my husband. The next few days were a blur of work, kids, and silence at home. My husband and I were like two ships passing in the night, barely acknowledging each other. It was during this time that I found out from a coworker that Mark had recently gone through a messy divorce. I guess that explained his newfound interest in socializing. Then, yesterday, everything came to a head. I came home from work, and my husband was waiting for me in the living room. He had this look on his face, a mix of anger and hurt. He asked me point blank if I was having an affair with Mark. I was shocked. I mean, yes, I had dinner with the guy, but an affair? That was the last thing on my mind. I explained to my husband about the dinner how it was just two colleagues grabbing a bite because we were working late. I told him how Mark had been a friend at work, nothing more. But my husband wasn't having it. He said he'd heard from a friend who saw us together, and it looked more intimate than just co-workers. I realized then that the friend must have seen us laughing and talking, and it probably did look intimate from an outside perspective. But it wasn't like that. I was just trying to fill the void that had grown between my husband and me. We argued back and forth, voices rising, until the kids came downstairs, sleepy and confused. We stopped immediately, plastering on fake smiles and assuring them everything was fine. They went back to bed, but the tension remained. My husband finally said he needed time to think and went to stay at a friend's house. I was left alone, feeling like the world was crumbling around me. I never intended for any of this to happen. I just wanted to feel connected to someone, even if it was just a coworker. Sister's insults ruined dinner, so I clapped back hard, but she didn't expect my next move. Her shock is palpable as the tables turn. Background. My 33-year-old friend Beth has an older sister named Jill, who is 38 years old. Since we first met, Jill has always hated me and called me names like weirdo freak. She even said that I deserved the bullying I experienced in school because I was a dork. Because of Jill, I stopped visiting Beth's house and didn't see her again until Beth's 18th birthday. On that occasion, Jill spread false rumors about me harassing her boyfriend, claiming that I was too ugly and weird to have my own guy. Luckily, Jill moved away soon after, and I was relieved to be free from her. Now, Beth, Liz, 33F, Kelly, 34F, Megan, 34F, and I planned a dinner reservation to catch up after not being able to see each other for over 2 years. Beth offered to give Kelly and me a ride to the restaurant since neither of us can drive, and I have chronic fatigue syndrome and several types of chronic pain, making traveling difficult for me. We all took a bus to Beth's apartment together, but to our surprise, Jill answered the door. Beth hadn't informed us that Jill was visiting, and it would have been nice to have a heads up, considering the history between Jill and the rest of us. Nevertheless, we remained polite. Kelly greeted Jill and complimented her dress, while I said, "Hi Jill, nice to see you. How have you been?" Unfortunately, Jill completely ignored Kelly and turned to me, saying, "Better than you, clearly. You're still a pale freak, aren't you?" I couldn't hold back and snapped back at her, saying, "At least I'm not a bitter hag who holds grudges against a 12-year-old. Maybe it's time for you to grow up." Immediately, Jill ran off screaming for Beth, insisting that she wouldn't take us anywhere until I apologize. However, Kelly and I were confused because we didn't understand why Jill was supposed to be driving us anywhere. Just as we were wondering about this, Beth emerged and informed us that her car was broken and Jill was supposed to be our driver. Beth scolded me for being mean to her sister and said it was Jill's sense of humor. Kelly called nonsense and pointed out that Jill is a bully, expressing surprise that I hadn't snapped at her years ago. Kelly also told me not to apologize, which I agreed with. Beth then decided that I would have to find my own way to the restaurant and promptly kicked us out. Kelly and I contacted Liz and Megan to let them know we would be running late, as we now had to pay for a taxi ourselves. Liz suggested that I should apologize to ease the tension, considering that Beth was taking Jill's side. On the other hand, Megan believed that this confrontation was long overdue and that Jill needed to face the consequences of her actions. In the end, I refused to apologize and we took a taxi. Later, we found out that Beth chose not to join us due to what I had said to Jill. It has been a week, and Beth is now refusing to speak with any of us, except Liz, who claimed I was at fault, until I apologized to her sister. Am I the idiot? Edit. Thank you for all the positive responses. I am heading to bed now, but will provide an update soon. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot, but you have to realize that the sister is not the problem. Beth is not your friend. She knows her sister has bullied you for years, and she has not only done nothing about it, she is now openly enabling and supporting the bullying. You should be done with her. You deserve better. Comment 2. Not the idiot. She is a bully, and always was. Do not apologize under any circumstances. Beth knows exactly who her sister is, and still sided with her when Jill was clearly in the wrong. Shame on Beth. Now for the update. Hey everyone, it's been a tense week since my last post. And boy, do I have an update for you all. So, after the whole mess with Jill and Beth, things took an unexpected turn. First off, let me give you a bit of history. Beth and I have been friends since we were kids. We've been through thick and thin, from our first crushes to our first jobs. But Jill, Beth's older sister, has always been a thorn in my side. I remember when we were teenagers, she'd make fun of my thrift store clothes while flaunting her brand new designer gear. It was like she enjoyed making me feel small. Now, back to the present. After Beth kicked Kelly and me out, we were pretty shaken up. We ended up at the restaurant, and the dinner with Liz and Megan was tense, to say the least. We tried to enjoy ourselves, but the elephant in the room was Beth's absence and the whole Jill situation. A couple of days later, Kelly, who's always been the detective type, found out something that blew our minds. Turns out Jill's visit wasn't just a casual drop-in. She had actually moved back in with Beth because her own life was falling apart. Her long-term boyfriend had dumped her, and she'd lost her job. Jill was in a bad place, and apparently she was taking it out on everyone else, me included. But here's the juicy part. Kelly overheard a conversation between Jill and someone on the phone. It turns out Jill's ex-boyfriend is none other than Beth's current boss, Mr. Thompson. And the reason they broke up? Jill had been caught trying to embezzle money from the company. Mr. Thompson had been kind enough not to press charges, but he ended the relationship and fired her. Now, this is where it gets even crazier. Beth had no idea about any of this. She thought Jill was just down on her luck and needed a place to stay. But Jill had been using Beth's apartment to plot her revenge against Mr. Thompson. She was planning to spread rumors about him to get him fired, and she was using Beth's connections to gather information. Kelly, being the loyal friend she is, decided we had to tell Beth everything. We were worried about how she'd take it, but we couldn't let her get dragged into Jill's mess. So we set up a meeting at a local coffee shop, just the four of us, without Jill. When we told Beth everything, she was in shock. She couldn't believe that Jill would do something like that, especially after everything she'd done for her. Beth was furious, not just at Jill, but at herself for being so blind. She thanked us for telling her and apologized for not believing us sooner. But wait, there's more. Beth confronted Jill when she got home, and it was a showdown for the ages. Jill tried to deny everything, but Beth had the evidence right in front of her. In the end, Jill broke down and admitted to everything. She begged for forgiveness, but Beth was having none of it. She told Jill she had to move out immediately. As for me, Beth reached out and apologized for not standing up for me against Jill. She admitted she should have seen the signs of Jill's behavior a long time ago. We've been talking, and it looks like our friendship might be on the mend. Stepdad can't play dad at my wedding after 16 years. He's mad, but Granny's secret. In the end, he dances with Mom, and I just smile. My mom married her husband when I, 28-year-old female, was 16. I met him that same year, and only lived in the same house as him for a little over a year before I moved out to go to college. I never saw him as a father figure, never saw him as a stepdad, meaning not a parent. I get along with him fine, and he's a nice guy, but that's about it. My brother, 30-year-old male, never lived with him. My brother got married in 2019, and my mom walked him down the aisle opposite his wife and her parents. Mom's husband was waiting for Mom in their seats. He did not include her husband in the wedding as a parent, because he wasn't one to my brother. This is something that upset Mom's husband, and I only learned this a few months ago when I got engaged. How I learned. This is my mom, and her husband mentioned that he was hoping I would ask him or both of them to walk me down the aisle. I chose to ask my paternal, Granny. I chose not to ask Mom because she and I had a less close relationship than she and my brother did growing up. My Granny is the person who gave me the support I needed. My mom's husband told me it had really hurt to be publicly declared not a parent or parent figure when he has always thought of us as his kids in some way. I asked him if a special dance with Mom or walking down the aisle with Mom would make him feel better, and he said no. He said he didn't want to be just something to Mom, but to be publicly acknowledged as a father figure. I told him he's not a father figure to me, and I'm sorry that he wants to be. But it's not how I see him. I asked him if there was something else he would like to do, and he said he wanted to walk me down the aisle or perform a father-daughter dance. I told him neither of those were an option, but if he wanted to do something else, we could discuss it. He and Mom both mentioned it over the last few months, and now my wedding is closing in on us. And my mom told me I should have given him an actual role as a parent of the bride. She said it's breaking his heart to know he only gets to be her husband and not a fatherly figure. She asked me if they paid for the wedding, if I would change my mind, and I said no. She asked how much they would have to contribute to the wedding for him to get the role as father of the bride, and I told her no amount. He then asked me why I didn't want him to fill the role when he's the only father figure I ever knew. My dad died when I was 2. When I spoke to him, he told me I was just being cruel, and to have both of us reject him as a father figure stung. Am I the idiot? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot. I asked him if a special dance with Mom or walking down the aisle with Mom would make him feel better, and he said no. This guy has got some nerve. You were more generous than you needed to be. It's supposed to be your day. He's making it about himself. You were accommodating, gracious enough to make a little allowance to try and comfort him, but he just flat out rejected it. You've done more than enough. You couldn't be less of an AH here. I'm sorry your mom doesn't have your back, but I guess that explains why she's not the one walking you down the aisle. Comment 2. Not the idiot. You are simply being honest about your feelings about him, and that is all you can do about this. You were way into your teens when you met him, and had a very short house-sharing experience. So it makes total sense that you simply see him as your mother's husband, and not a father figure. The wedding is yours, and you are the one who gets to decide who you want to have a special role or not. How he or your mom feel about it is absolutely not your responsibility or a burden you should carry. Good luck on your marriage, and congratulations. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the comments on my last post. I wanted to give you an update on the situation with my mom's husband and my wedding, and let me tell you, things have taken some unexpected turns. So, after I last posted, things were tense for a while. My mom's husband, let's call him Rick, was still pretty upset about the whole wedding role situation. He kept trying to find ways to be involved, but I was firm on my decision. I mean, I get it, he's been around since I was 16, but he never really stepped into that fatherly role. He was more like my mom's partner who happened to live with us. Now, here's where things got really crazy. About a month ago, I was over at my mom's place, going through some old photo albums for wedding slideshow material. I stumbled upon a picture of Rick from way back, like before he even knew my mom. And guess who was in the photo with him? My granny. They were all cozy and looked super close. I was shocked and confused, so I asked my granny about it. Turns out, Rick and my granny had a fling back in the day. They dated for a hot minute before life took them in different directions. My granny never mentioned it because she didn't think it was relevant, especially after Rick married my mom. I couldn't believe it. My wedding planner, Granny, had a history with the man trying to be my stepdad. I confronted Rick about it, and he was embarrassed, but admitted it was true. He said he didn't think it was important to bring up, since it was so long ago. But here's the kicker. He confessed that part of the reason he wanted to be involved in my wedding so badly was because he felt guilty for not staying in touch with my granny after their split. He thought by being part of my wedding, he could somehow make amends for the past. I was floored. This whole time, there was this weird personal history between Rick and my granny, and it was affecting my wedding. I didn't know what to think. Meanwhile, my brother, who's always been the protective type, got wind of the drama. He was furious that Rick was causing so much stress and confronted him. They had a huge argument, and my brother accused Rick of trying to rewrite history and insert himself into our family in ways we weren't comfortable with. Rick was hurt by my brother's words, but it seemed to be a wake-up call for him. He apologized to both of us and said he'd back off from the wedding plans. He admitted that he let his emotions and past with my granny cloud his judgment. As for my mom, she was caught in the middle of all this. She had no idea about Rick's past with my granny and felt betrayed that he kept it from her. They had some long, intense talks, and it seemed like they were working through it, but it definitely added some strain to their relationship. With the wedding getting closer, I had to focus on finalizing details. I decided to have a heart-to-heart with my granny. She was incredibly understanding and offered to step back if it made things easier, but I reassured her that I wanted her by my side on my big day. On the day of the wedding, Rick kept a low profile. He was there with my mom, looking proud, but also a bit somber. I shared a special dance with my granny, and it was a beautiful moment that I'll cherish forever. In the end, the wedding was lovely, and despite the drama leading up to it, everyone seemed to have a good time. Rick even shared a dance with my mom that was sweet and full of emotion. It was clear that despite everything, there was a lot of love in that room. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.